Josh Seartson from World Alternative Media here, and I'm going to give you all some examples of how the media is controlled by the government and how most of what we're told is a lie. I'll start off with a recent story that certainly should be getting more airplay, but you'll find out soon enough why it is not. A CNN quote-unquote journalist has been outed for taking demands from the government as leaked classified State Department emails show Elise Labott of CNN was being told what to tweet by State Department official Philip Raines regarding the Hillary Clinton Benghazi hearings in 2013. Elise Labott is a foreign affairs correspondent for CNN who you can often find reading her scripted piece on TV regarding such subjects as Syrian refugees or ISIS insurgents. In email leaked to Gawker, you can see Elise Labott speaking with State Department official and Clinton aide Philip Raines. "I suggested a good tweet," Raines said, to which Ms. Labott replied, "We'll get back to you," and followed that message up with the word "done" a few minutes later. The tweet was a favorable quote of Hillary Clinton's that said, "Clinton, I tried to be transparent. I could have joined the 18 ARBs, kept it classified, and then said goodbye. That is not who I am." Of course, Hillary. Elise Labott also asked Philip Raines, "Are you sure Rand Paul wasn't at any hearings?" She was checking on whether Rand Paul attended the inquiries for Benghazi. She then wrote this tweet, "Senator Paul most critical on committee of Clinton, but a little late to the Benghazi game. Not sure he was at many of the 30 previous briefings." Senator Rand Paul's campaign has issued several complaints about Ms. Labott's journalistic integrity due to this obvious propaganda, no matter how big or small. After all was done, Labott wrote to Raines, "Clinton was great, well done. I hope you're going to have a big drink tonight." The funny thing is, Elise Labott got suspended from CNN for a few weeks, but not for this, but for editorializing on a tweet about Syrian refugees on Twitter. At least she's giving her own talking points in that case and not taking them from someone bigger than her. It seems these reporters only get in trouble when they go off script. This kind of brings me back to 2014 when Russia Today anchor Anissa Naouai's CNN interview was censored. They aired her interview with Christine Amanpour, but edited out this part right here.
And so it's interesting to us that these kind of questions are asked by the mainstream media, by a channel like CNN, who has journalists that have left the channel because documentaries on Bahrain haven't been run, like iRevolution a couple of years ago, which air programs like Eye on Georgia, Eye on Kazakhstan, Eye on Lebanon, which are essentially government-sponsored programs. And that's barely, very, very secretly disclosed to the audience. You really have to go on the site and dig for it to find that these are not sort of just basic, unbiased reporting on the ground. These are government-sponsored programs aired on television. But it's an absurd question coming from someone that's propagated the line of the State Department for over 15 years. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You've propagated the line of the State Department for over 15 years, starting with Yugoslavia and all the way into Syria. And now you're doing it for Ukraine, essentially. Absolutely, I'm talking to you.
But this isn't new news. I mean, going back to William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper mogul that palled around with politicians, bankers, celebrities, and more, was known to work with the government, and if one was to anger Hearst, they could say goodbye to their careers. Ask Fatty Arbuckle. Then we have things like Operation Mockingbird, which was basically the infiltration of the entire mass media in the United States, especially by the CIA.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
It's all declassified now and was said to have ended, but journalists throughout the decades since have begged to differ. We spoke to former New York Times journalist Chris Hedges about this in early 2015. Now, during your years at the New York Times, did you ever see signs of things such as Operation Mockingbird or other CIA control over what can or can't be printed?
You don't rise at the New York Times unless you internalize what can or can't be printed, first of all. And if you start hitting them with stories that they don't like, then they deep six your career. Most people at the paper are careerists. They've spent a long time climbing to whatever position they're in, and you internalize the censorship.
Remember Charles Jaco, the CNN correspondent? Anyone remember him during the Persian Gulf War? What about that time that he faked an entire news story on a set in Atlanta while pretending to be ducking for cover when fake bombs went off?
This is what we can show you on television right now because of military restrictions from both the Saudis and the U.S.
CD, if you need to take cover, I notice that you've got your gas mask in your hands. If you need to put it on, please do so. If you need to take cover, please do so.
Like it might have been an explosion in the crowd. The lights say...
Then there's journalist Amber Lyon, who came out against CNN after working for CNN for several years, saying that due to their deals with certain dictatorial governments around the world, they wouldn't show her story in Bahrain, showing innocent people being massacred.
Bahrain is paying CNN to create content that shows Bahrain in a favorable light, even though CNN says this content, is editorially independent. It doesn't see Bahrain can't affect that. Well, we've seen that with this documentary not airing, and also with the constant struggle I had at CNN to get Bahrain coverage, accurate Bahrain coverage of the human rights abuses on air while I was there.
Then there's Anderson Cooper, who spent time as a CIA intern. Luke Rudowski of We Are Change has confronted him twice on this, where Cooper refuses to dispute anything, mostly because it's documented fact that he did indeed work for the CIA, and he does, after all, come from the mega-rich and powerful Vanderbilt family.
You didn't have any journalistic training except CIA training. I mean, yeah.
You know Zbigniew Brzezinski? If not, he's the man that handed over weapons to Osama bin Laden in the late 1970s. His daughter is Mika Brzezinski, a well-known anchor on MSNBC News. Zbigniew Brzezinski has even been quoted saying that the mass political awakening through internet and radio needs to be stopped in order to create a new world order and be able to go to war. So he's frustrated people are being awakened by alternative media. That's totally not nefarious at all. And who can forget the Ron Paul media blackout, which was so obvious even Jon Stewart covered it.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, we haven't mentioned, and we should,
thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got.
With polls on all media stations changed to show other candidates ahead of Dr. Paul, even taking Ron Paul out of polls he won or came in second in, completely balancing out the margin of error. Ron Paul would get over 10,000 people at an event with no media coverage, and then a week later in the same location, Mitt Romney would get less than a crowd of 100, and most of the crowd would be media talking about how Mitt Romney's killing everyone in the polls.
I am gaining recognition in the campaign, and it's a threat to a lot of people.
There are so many other examples of how the media controls the mind and is in fact the aid of the government and their talking points. I myself have dealt with the mainstream media covering up or manipulating my stories. This is why we need to be the media, to be the change we wish to see. This is why Wham goes out and confronts politicians and have for years. Even confronting infamous media mogul Lord Conrad Black, who was on the steering commission of the Bilderberg Group for decades and ended up in prison for his actions at Hollinger. Getting visited often by Prime Minister Tony Blair, then getting out and getting his own TV show just like that on Zoomer.
Have a good night, Lord Black.
You're a persistent young man.
Modern day media is a joke. These so-called journalists are a joke. Elections don't even need to be rigged anymore because the government infiltrates the media and gives us our 2 or 3 candidates to pick from. They're choices, the only people we hear about in the media, and therefore the ones that most of us vote for.
Everything's a lie. It's all a big lie.
We need to support independent media like We Are Change, Press for Truth, Freedom Free for All, Adam Kokett, Infowars, James Corbett, Brainfeed, Jeff Berwick, and of course us at World Alternative Media. It's crucial for the sake of our information and with that, our path as a society. Will we be slaves or will we be free human beings with truth at our fingertips? You decide. This is Josh Sitterton signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Thank you.